What happens when one of Hollywood's most respected actresses completely loses her composure on daytime television? Emma Thompson, known for her grace and wit, stunned everyone when she absolutely erupted during what seemed like a routine appearance on The Kelly Clarkson Show. The exchange started innocently enough, but within minutes, the atmosphere shifted from lighthearted banter to something nobody in that studio was prepared for. "What?" Kelly asked, and how Emma responded left the audience in shocked silence. Before we get into exactly what was said, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below telling us what you think really happened here, because this is one interview that needs to be dissected from every angle. The studio lights were bright as always. The audience settled into their seats with that anticipatory energy that comes before every taping. Kelly Clarkson walked out to her usual thunderous applause. That signature smile plastered across her face as she waved to the crowd. She was wearing a vibrant yellow dress, the kind that screamed optimism and warmth, perfect for the bubbly persona she'd cultivated over years of hosting. The show had become known for its feel-good moments, celebrity guests opening up about their lives, sharing funny anecdotes, sometimes getting a little emotional, but always in that controlled, television-friendly way. Nobody expected what was about to unfold. Kelly took her seat, did her usual greeting to the camera, thanked everyone for watching, and then introduced her guest with genuine enthusiasm. Emma Thompson, she announced, was here to talk about her latest project, a film that had been generating Oscar buzz for weeks. The audience erupted in applause as Emma walked onto the stage, dressed in an elegant navy blazer and tailored pants, her silver hair styled perfectly. She smiled, waved, and took her seat across from Kelly, crossing her legs and settling in with the relaxed confidence of someone who had done thousands of interviews before. The first few minutes went exactly as planned. Kelly asked about the film. Emma gave thoughtful answers peppered with her trademark dry humor. They laughed about a funny moment on set, discussed working with the director, touched on the themes of the movie. The audience was engaged. Kelly was nodding enthusiastically. Everything seemed perfectly normal. Then Kelly shifted gears, and that's when the temperature in the room began to change. So Emma Kelly said, leaning forward slightly with that casual intimacy talk show host's perfect, "I've been reading a lot about you lately, and there's something I'm really curious about. You've been so outspoken over the years about various issues, and I admire that. I really do. But I wanted to ask you about something you said in an interview a few months ago. You made some pretty strong comments about the film industry, about how it treats women over a certain age. Do you still stand by everything you said in that interview?" Emma's expression shifted almost imperceptibly. Her smile remained, but something hardened around her eyes. She took a breath before responding. "Yes, Kelly, I do stand by what I said. Every word of it. I spoke about the systemic ageism and sexism that exists in this industry. The way women are discarded the moment they stop fitting into a very narrow definition of desirable. I spoke about it because it's true and because it needs to be said." Kelly nodded, but there was something in her tone that suggested she wasn't quite satisfied with that answer. "Right, but here's what some people have been saying, and I'm just playing devil's advocate here, but some people have suggested that maybe, and I'm just asking, maybe some of your comments came across as, I don't know, a little bitter. Like maybe you were speaking from a place of personal frustration, rather than looking at the bigger picture." The audience went quiet. It was one of those moments where you could feel the collective intake of breath, everyone suddenly aware that something uncomfortable was happening. Emma's jaw tightened visibly. She uncrossed her legs and sat up straighter in her chair. "Bitter," Emma repeated slowly, as if testing the word in her mouth. "You think advocating for equality and calling out discrimination is being bitter?" Kelly immediately tried to backtrack, holding up her hands in a defensive gesture. No, that's not what I'm saying at all. I'm just saying that's what some people have said, and I wanted to give you a chance to respond to that criticism." "Some people," Emma said, her voice taking on a sharper edge. "Who exactly are these people, Kelly? Do they have names? Are they people who've experienced what I've experienced? Or are they people comfortable with the status quo because it benefits them?" Kelly shifted uncomfortably in her seat. "Look, I think we're getting off on the wrong foot here. I'm not attacking you, Emma. I'm just trying to have a conversation about something that's been out there in the media. Isn't that what we do on this show? We talk about things." Emma leaned forward now, her eyes locked on Kelly's. "What we're doing, Kelly? is you're using coded language to diminish legitimate criticism of an industry that has a well-documented history of marginalizing women. When a woman speaks up about injustice, she's bitter. When she refuses to smile and be grateful for scraps, she's difficult. I've heard these words my entire career, and frankly, I'm exhausted by them. The tension was palpable. Kelly's smile had completely vanished now, replaced by a look of genuine discomfort. She glanced briefly at her producers off camera. A quick flick of the eyes that betrayed her uncertainty about how to proceed. "I think you're misunderstanding me," Kelly said, her voice taking on a slightly defensive tone. "I'm actually on your side here. I'm a woman in this industry too. I know what it's like to face challenges. But I also think there's a way to talk about these issues without being so, confrontational about it." Emma actually laughed at that, but it wasn't a pleasant sound. It was sharp and incredulous. "Confrontational," she repeated. "Kelly, do you know what's confrontational? Being told at 40 that you're too old to play opposite an actor who's 55. Being offered grandmother roles when men your age are still playing action heroes and romantic leads. Being paid a fraction of what your male co-stars make for the same work. That's confrontational. Me talking about it is just being honest." Kelly was clearly flustered now, her face flushing slightly. "Okay, but don't you think that things have gotten better? I mean, there are more opportunities for women now than ever before. Look at you. You're still working. You're still getting great roles. Doesn't that count for something?" Emma's eyes widened in disbelief. "Doesn't that count for something? Kelly, do you hear yourself? The bar is so low that we're supposed to be grateful just for being allowed to work. I've won 2 Academy Awards. I've been in this industry for over 40 years. And you're suggesting I should be thankful for the scraps I'm being offered?" "I didn't say scraps," Kelly protested, but Emma was on a roll now. "You didn't have to say it," Emma shot back. "That's what you implied. And this is exactly the problem. Even other women who should understand, who should be allies, perpetuate these same harmful narratives. You're sitting there asking me if I'm bitter, if I'm being too confrontational, instead of asking why the industry I've dedicated my life to treats me and countless other women as disposable commodities." Kelly was visibly struggling now, trying to regain control of the interview. "Emma, I really think you're taking this the wrong way. I'm not your enemy here. I'm just trying to have a dialogue." "A dialogue," Emma said coldly, "implies to people listening to each other. What you're doing is invalidating my experiences and my perspective by suggesting they're rooted in bitterness rather than legitimate grievance. That's not dialogue, Kelly. That's dismissal." The audience was completely silent now. Some people looked uncomfortable. Others seemed riveted by the confrontation unfolding before them. Kelly's producers were definitely panicking off camera. You could see crew members exchanging worried glances. Kelly tried once more to steer things back. "Look, maybe we can talk about your new film. That's really what you're here for, right?" Emma stood up abruptly, and the audience gasped. "No, Kelly, I don't think I can do that. I don't think I can sit here and pretend everything's fine after you've spent the last several minutes trying to paint me as some bitter old woman who can't handle criticism. I came here in good faith to talk about my work, and instead you've used your platform to undermine me." Kelly stood up too, now looking genuinely distressed. "Emma, please, sit down. I'm sorry if I offended you. That wasn't my intention at all. Your intention doesn't matter as much as your impact," Emma said, her voice ringing through the studio. "And the impact of what you've done here today is to reinforce the very stereotypes and dismissals that I've been fighting against my entire career." Kelly's face had gone pale, her usual composure completely shattered. She looked desperately toward her producers again, but this time the gesture was more obvious, more panicked. Emma remained standing, her posture rigid, every inch of her radiating controlled fury. The audience sat frozen, some with their hands over their mouths, others leaning forward in their seats as if physically pulled toward the drama unfolding before them. "Please, Emma," Kelly said, her voice taking on a pleading quality that viewers had never heard from her before. "Please, just sit down so we can talk about this properly. I really didn't mean to upset you." Emma remained standing, her arms crossed now. "You keep saying you didn't mean to, as if that absolves you of responsibility. But Kelly, you're a professional interviewer. You had to know that asking me if I was being bitter, suggesting I was too confrontational, those are loaded terms. Those are the exact words that have been used to silence women for generations. You had to know that. I was just asking questions, Kelly insisted, but her voice lacked conviction now. That's my job, to ask questions that maybe are uncomfortable sometimes. That's what makes for good television. Emma actually scoffed at that. Good television? So that's what this was about. You wanted to create a moment, didn't you? You wanted to push me to see if you could get a reaction. Well, congratulations, Kelly. You got one. I hope the ratings are worth it. That's not fair, Kelly said. And now there was a hint of anger creeping into her own voice. You're acting like I ambushed you with some gotcha question. I asked you about your own words, about things you've said publicly. If you can't handle being asked about your own statements, then maybe you shouldn't make them. The audience audibly gasped at that. Emma's eyes flashed dangerously, and for a moment it looked like she might actually walk off the stage entirely. Instead, she took a step closer to Kelly, closing the distance between them. Emma said, her voice low and intense. Oh, Kelly, I can handle it just fine. What I can't handle is the hypocrisy. You sit here in your yellow dress with your bright smile, positioning yourself as America's sweetheart, asking invasive questions under the guise of curiosity, and then acting shocked when someone calls you out on it. You want me to make myself smaller, more palatable, easier to digest for your audience. And I'm telling you, I won't do it. Kelly's eyes were glistening now, looking suspiciously like tears might be forming. I have never asked you to make yourself smaller. I invited you here because I respect you, because I wanted to have a meaningful conversation with you. Then why didn't you ask me about my craft? Emma demanded. Why didn't you ask me about the choices I made in this role, about what drew me to the character, about the collaborative process with the director? Why did you immediately go to a question designed to put me on the defensive, to make me justify my right to speak out about injustice? Because people are talking about it, Kelly said, her voice rising slightly. Because it's part of the conversation around you right now. And yes, maybe I wanted to address it. Is that such a crime? To want to talk about something relevant and current. Relevant to whom? Emma shot back. To you? To your producers who probably thought this would be a great way to generate buzz, because I can assure you, Kelly, it's not relevant to the actual work I've done. The film I'm here to discuss is a beautiful, nuanced piece about grief and resilience. It's about a woman rebuilding her life after loss. That's what's relevant. That's what we should be discussing. But instead, you chose to make this about drama, about conflict. Kelly wiped at her eye quickly, trying to maintain some semblance of composure. You're twisting everything I'm saying. You're making me out to be some villain when all I did was ask a question. One question, Emma, and you've blown this completely out of proportion. One question, Emma repeated, shaking her head slowly. Kelly, you don't get it, do you? It's never just one question. It's the accumulation of thousands of questions like this asked by hundreds of interviewers over decades, all designed to undermine, to diminish, to distract from the actual work. Every time a woman achieves something, there's always someone there to ask if she's being too aggressive about it, too emotional, too difficult. And the most insidious part is when it comes from other women. I'm not trying to undermine you, Kelly said, but her voice had lost its strength. She sounded tired now, defeated. I'm really not. But you are, Emma insisted. Whether you mean to or not, that's exactly what you're doing. And the worst part is that you probably think you're being fair, being balanced. You probably rehearsed that question thinking it was provocative but appropriate. But what you failed to consider is the context, the history. The weight those words carry for women like me, who've been fighting this fight for longer than you've been famous. Kelly flinched visibly at that last comment. The audience shifted uncomfortably in their seats. This had gone far beyond awkward television. This was genuinely painful to watch. One of the producers finally stepped forward from the wings, making himself partially visible, clearly trying to signal something to Kelly. She saw him but didn't acknowledge him directly. Emma, Kelly said slowly, deliberately, I understand that you feel attacked right now. I can see that you're angry and hurt. But I need you to understand something too. I'm not your enemy. The industry that's failed you, that's the enemy. The system that values youth over experience, that's the enemy. I'm just a person trying to do my job, trying to have conversations that matter. But the conversation you chose to have doesn't matter, Emma said, her voice quieter now, but no less intense. Not in the way you think it does. You think you're being edgy, contemporary, unafraid to ask the tough questions. But really, You're just perpetuating the same tired narratives that keep women divided, that keep us fighting each other instead of the actual structures of power that oppress us all." Kelly looked genuinely confused now. "I don't understand how asking you about something you said publicly is perpetuating anything. You put those words out into the world. You had to know people would have reactions to them, would want to discuss them." "Of course I knew people would have reactions," Emma said impatiently. "That's precisely why I said them. I wanted to start a conversation about ageism and sexism in Hollywood. But the conversation I wanted to start was about the industry's practices, about concrete examples of discrimination, about what needs to change. The conversation you're trying to have is about me, about my tone, about whether I'm too angry or too bitter. Do you see the difference?" Kelly opened her mouth to respond, then closed it again. She seemed to be genuinely grappling with Emma's words, trying to process them in real time, while dozens of cameras captured every flicker of emotion on her face. Finally, she said, "I guess I see your point. But I still think you're being unfair to me. I'm not responsible for the entire history of how women have been treated in media. I'm just one person asking one question, and I'm one person answering," Emma said. "And my answer is that I won't participate in this anymore. I won't sit here and be psychoanalyzed for having opinions about my own industry. I won't defend my right to speak truth to power, and I certainly won't pretend that questions about my supposed bitterness are legitimate when they're clearly designed to discredit me." "They weren't designed to discredit you," Kelly said, but she sounded less certain now. They were questions." "Kelly, everything is just something Kelly," Emma replied. "Just questions, just words, just the way things are. But all those justs add up to something much bigger. They add up to a culture where women are constantly being told to smile more, speak softer, be grateful, don't make waves. And I'm done with it. I'm done pretending that these innocent little questions aren't part of a much larger problem." Kelly looked at her feet for a moment, then back up at Emma. "So what do you want me to do? Apologize? Is that what this is about?" Emma's expression softened slightly, just a fraction. "This isn't about you apologizing, Kelly. This is about you understanding that the questions you ask, the framing you use, the assumptions you make, they all have consequences. They shape how your audience thinks about these issues. You have a platform, a significant one. What you choose to do with it matters." "I know it matters," Kelly said quietly. "That's why I take it seriously. That's why I try to ask substantive questions instead of just lobbing softballs." "But there's a difference between substantive and reductive," Emma countered. "Asking me about the actual content of my criticism, asking me to elaborate on specific instances of discrimination I've witnessed, asking me what solutions I propose, those would be substantive questions. Asking me if I'm bitter is reductive. It reduces a complex issue to a simple personality flaw." Kelly nodded slowly, seeming to absorb this. The anger had drained from both of them now, replaced by something more like exhaustion. The audience remained silent, transfixed. This was no longer entertainment. This was education, uncomfortable and necessary. The silence stretched between them, heavy and loaded with everything that had been said and everything that remained unspoken. Kelly finally gestured weakly toward the chairs they had abandoned. "Can we sit, please? My legs are shaking." Emma hesitated for a long moment, then slowly lowered herself back into her chair. Kelly did the same, perching on the edge of her seat as if ready to bolt at any moment. The dynamic between them had shifted entirely. The easy rapport of host and guest completely dissolved into something raw and uncertain. "I need you to understand something, Emma," Kelly began, her voice stripped of its usual brightness. "When I was preparing for this interview, I genuinely thought that question would give you an opportunity to address your critics directly. I thought I was doing you a favor, giving you a platform to respond to what people have been saying. I didn't think of it as an attack." Emma's expression remained skeptical. "And that's precisely the problem, Kelly. You didn't think. You didn't consider how framing it as a question about bitterness would automatically put me in a defensive position. You didn't think about how that language has been weaponized against women for centuries. You just thought it would make for an interesting moment." "Maybe I did," Kelly admitted, and there was something almost brave in that admission, in letting the mask slip completely. "Maybe I was thinking about the show, about creating something memorable. But that doesn't mean I was trying to hurt you. There's a difference between being thoughtless and being malicious." "Is there, though?" Emma asked, and the question hung in the air between them, because the impact is often the same, regardless of intention. A thoughtless question can do just as much damage as a malicious one, sometimes more, because at least with malice, you know what you're dealing with. Thoughtlessness masquerades as innocence. Kelly's jaw tightened. So what? I'm supposed to second-guess every question I ask. I'm supposed to run everything through some kind of filter to make sure nobody could possibly be offended. That's not what I'm saying, and you know it, Emma replied sharply. I'm saying you should consider the context and the history before you ask questions that touch on sensitive issues. I'm saying you should think about whether your question serves to illuminate or to inflame. There's nothing wrong with asking difficult questions, Kelly, but there's everything wrong with asking lazy ones. Lazy, Kelly repeated, and now the anger was creeping back into her voice. You think I'm lazy? Do you have any idea how much work goes into this show? How many hours of research? How many meetings? How much preparation? I'm not talking about your work ethic, Emma said with exasperation. I'm talking about intellectual laziness. The laziness of falling back on tired tropes and stereotypes instead of actually engaging with the substance of what someone is saying. You took the easy route, Kelly. You went for the personal angle instead of the political one because it's simpler, more digestible for your audience. My audience isn't stupid, Kelly shot back, defensive now. They can handle complex conversations. They do handle them on this show all the time. Then why didn't you give them one today? Emma challenged. Why did you reduce a conversation about systemic discrimination to a question about my emotional state? If you trust your audience to handle complexity, why did you serve them something so simplistic? Kelly stared at her, and for a moment it looked like she might cry again. Instead, she took a deep breath and said, You want the truth? The real truth? Fine. My producers told me that controversy drives engagement. They told me that people love it when things get a little heated, when there's conflict. And yes, I let that influence how I approached this interview. I let ratings and metrics and all of that garbage get into my head. And maybe that was wrong. Maybe I should have pushed back. But this is the reality of television, Emma. This is what we're up against. So you're blaming your producers now? Emma asked, but her tone was less accusatory than curious. You're saying this wasn't your choice. I'm saying it's complicated, Kelly responded. I'm saying there are pressures that come with this job that maybe you don't fully understand. Every decision gets analyzed. Every rating point matters. If the show doesn't perform, it gets canceled. It's not just about me. It's about everyone who works here. All the people whose livelihoods depend on this show being successful. Emma leaned back in her chair, studying Kelly with new eyes. So you're telling me that you compromised your integrity because you were afraid? Afraid of losing your show, your status, your security? When you put it like that, it sounds terrible, Kelly said quietly. But yes, I guess that's what I'm saying. I made a choice to ask a question I knew would generate a reaction because I've been told that's what works, that's what keeps people watching. And sitting here now, hearing you tear apart that logic, I realize how hollow it all sounds. It is hollow, Emma said, but her voice had lost some of its edge. But I also understand it, Kelly. I understand the fear of irrelevance, the pressure to perform, the constant need to prove your value in an industry that's always looking for the next thing. I felt all of that, but the difference is, I decided a long time ago that I wouldn't let that fear dictate my choices. I wouldn't compromise what I believe in just to make myself more palatable. That's easy to say when you've already established yourself, Kelly countered. When you've already won your awards and proven your talent. But what about people who are still trying to build something? Are they supposed to sacrifice their careers on principle? If the principle matters, yes, Emma said simply, because otherwise, what are we doing? What's the point of any of this if we're just perpetuating the same harmful systems that we claim to oppose? You can't fight for change while simultaneously feeding the machine that prevents it. Kelly shook her head slowly. That's such an absolutist way of looking at it. You're saying there's no room for nuance, no way to work within the system while also trying to change it. I'm saying that working within the system requires being honest about the compromises you're making, Emma replied. If you had come to me before this interview and said, Kelly, I need to ask you about the criticism you've received because my producers are pressuring me to create a controversial moment. At least that would have been honest. At least then, we could have had a real conversation about it. But instead, you pretended it was journalism, that you were just doing your job as an interviewer. That's what I can't respect. The audience was barely breathing now, every eye fixed on the two women locked in this intense exchange. This had become something far more than a celebrity interview gone wrong. This was a dissection of power, compromise, and integrity in real time. Kelly looked down at her hands, folded in her lap. "You're right," she said finally, so quietly that the microphones barely picked it up. "You're absolutely right. I should have been honest with you. I should have been honest with myself. I told myself I was just doing my job, but really I was taking the cowardly way out." Emma's expression softened considerably at that admission. "It takes courage to admit that, Kelly. More courage than most people have. And for what it's worth, I don't think you're a coward. I think you're caught in an impossible situation, trying to balance authenticity with commercial demands. But the question you need to ask yourself is, at what point does that balance become untenable? At what point do you say, this is who I am, and this is what I stand for, regardless of the consequences?" Kelly looked up, meeting Emma's eyes directly for the first time since the confrontation had begun. "And what if I'm not strong enough for that? What if I care too much about keeping this job, keeping this life I've built?" "Then you're human," Emma said simply. "But being human doesn't exempt you from responsibility. It doesn't give you permission to hurt others just to protect yourself. And that's what happened here today, Kelly, whether you intended it or not. You hurt me by suggesting my legitimate grievances were just bitterness. You hurt every woman who's been dismissed and diminished for speaking up. You hurt your own integrity by asking a question you didn't even believe in." Kelly's eyes filled with tears again, and this time she didn't try to hide them. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice breaking. "I am so sorry, Emma. You deserved better than this. You deserved a real conversation about your work and your perspective, not some cheap attempt at creating drama. I'm sorry." Emma watched her for a long moment, then reached across and briefly touched Kelly's hand. "I accept your apology, but Kelly, you need to do better. Not just for me, but for yourself. Because this path you're on, this constant compromise, it's going to eat away at you until there's nothing left of the person you actually want to be." Kelly nodded, wiping at her tears with the back of her hand. "How do I do that, though? How do I push back against all the pressure without losing everything?" "You start small," Emma said. "You start by questioning the assumptions, by pushing back when something doesn't feel right, by having the courage to say no sometimes even when it's uncomfortable. You build that muscle over time until it becomes second nature. But it requires commitment, Kelly. It requires deciding that your integrity matters more than your comfort. If you made it this far, make sure you subscribe to the channel and drop a comment below. What do you think Kelly should have done differently from the start? Let us know your thoughts.